I'm Tom Maxwell. The best thing that Tim LaFollette did before he died was to become an advocate for ALS. And he did so through this series, Often Awesome. Watch it and spread it around to all your friends. Let's raise awareness about this disease and stamp it out.
Hello, my name is Tim and I have ALS, America's best kept secret disease. The last time I went to the hospital, we all knew it was coming. Green discharge was pouring from my neck. It was horrible.
He went back into the hospital after a night of having, he had a fever and just green discharge from his trach. And I remember getting texts from Kim the next morning and she said, "We're calling the ambulance." I told Tim he really needs to go to the hospital or he's gonna die. And I was getting these messages from Kim and she was saying, "This isn't good."
Essentially, it was just this same infection repeating itself, and we had gone from antibiotic to antibiotic and tried everything from any grade that we could administer at home from a nurse to ones that we had to be hospitalized in order to receive. And it wasn't budging, and even though it would let up, it was still coming back, and it was really persistent.
In the ER they had to do a central line, and I passed out from the pain. The whole trip was agonizing.
Tim told me later that week that was absolutely the most painful thing he had ever experienced in his life. It was, and I mean, there was so much blood that it was just, his pillow was soaked in blood. There was so much blood on his sheets after that procedure. Just because they had to get a vein, they had to be able to get in, to get the arterial blood, and they needed to be able to get access to his veins to do, to give him antibiotics, and it was terrifying for him.
It was heartbreaking and it was gut-wrenching every second that he was in the hospital.
I remember going in to see him during that visit, and he said, "No more, I am done." He said, "I'm not saying no to treatment, but I will take any treatment left, any other treatments that are available to me, I will take them at home."
A lot of his medications that he was on in order, like for anxiety and pain, he couldn't take while he was on these antibiotics. So he had to forego comfort in order to fight this infection, and that kind of became the song and dance that he had to deal with every time this infection came back.
My experience there was to get him out of the hospital, to get home, to die, and that was the first time he actually acknowledged it. Was, "Dude, get me out of here so I can go home and die." He didn't use any other word for it. There was no reading between the lines. He literally said, "Get me out of here so I can go home to die."
I decided to never go back. Whatever happens, I am staying home.
We understood that this was going to result in him dying. And that's where comfort and happiness came into play more than trying to win the medical battle, because we just couldn't.
There's a thing that happens when you get him home and you put him back in his bed, to where there was almost a sense of comfort in his face, which is hard to say because his face didn't really express anything. It was more of his eyes. That kind of like, back in my bed, wasn't there. It was more like, this is different, almost like this is the last time he's going to be placed in his bed. The next time he's moved from this bed will be when he's not in his body. He had told the nursing staff to stop feeding him and didn't tell any of us. And in my head, it was like the most genius move, because here you are with these two options: either tell your friends to turn off a machine or wait for an infection to slowly kill you. He wouldn't want to put that on us, so he just stopped eating.
I have mixed feelings about being the face of the disease. I know that we reach people, but some days I feel like my life is just some story. And the fucked up thing is my death will bring that much more attention. I know it will. And I want it to. Because this is fucked up. And it has to be heard. Too bad I have to die to do it.
I wasn't ready for him to be, you know, to want to go. And I don't know that he ever really wanted to go. But I wasn't ready for him to accept it.
And the only thing different about this time when he said goodbye was he would usually say, go get some sleep, or later hippie, or, you know, something like love you. He actually typed, goodbye, love you, bro. And again, you know, the convenience of having the Toby in front of his line of sight, I kind of started to cry. So I kind of stepped in front of his computer for a second and was like kind of wiped him away, and I was like, all right, dude, man, I'll see you later. That's when he fell asleep for 4 days.
The Thursday that I came, Kim called and she said, this isn't good. He's been asleep for 36 hours. He's feverish. He's got a lot of green discharge. This is not good. So I immediately left work and I came over to his house, and I asked him, I said, okay, where is the line between asleep and unconscious? Because I have a feeling that being asleep for 36 hours is not technically asleep anymore. And so she said, let's check. And so we took a flashlight and we lifted his eyelids to check his pupils to see if they were dilating. And one of his eyes was looking straight ahead and the other one was kind of cocked off to the side a little bit. And his pupils were reacting, but they were very sluggish.
His kidneys had started to fail, and he, that Thursday night, came out of whatever it was that he was in. It was he and I and Devender and the nurse were in the other room, and he and I had our last conversation. I asked if he wanted me to ask him yes or no questions about what he was going through, and he said yes. And I asked him if he was in pain, and he said no. And I asked him if he was ready for end-of-life care. I told him what had happened, that he had been unresponsive for about a day, and he was fully aware what was going on. And then I told him that I loved him and he was my best friend. And he kind of smiled and just said yes. And then he fell asleep again. And that was the last time I talked to him.
Every medical person we spoke to said there will be the last hurrah. There will be this moment where he might bounce back and have a good moment, and that will be, you know, him saying goodbye before he drifts away. And I fell asleep. I remember falling asleep Friday night about 3 o'clock in the morning, just kind of watching him. And I woke up to his sister grabbing my foot, and it gave me a heart attack. I jump out of the chair and she says, Katie, he's awake. And so I wake up and Tim's just sort of laying there, and he kind of looks over at me, and everybody else in the house was still asleep. And so we're going around waking everybody up, but I walked over, you know, I'm sitting there and I'm just like holding his hand, and I'm like, Tim, hi. And he says, and he kind of does his little nodding thing with his eyes, and I just leaned in and I kissed him and I said, I love you so much. And then I looked back at him and he nodded his eyes, and I was like, that was what I needed. I needed that moment because I couldn't handle the fact that I wasn't gonna get to say anything else to Tim, and that I wasn't gonna get to say, you know, an official goodbye, really. But I just wanted that one more thing, that one more moment with him. And I got it.
We reached out to Mary Beth Geis, one of the main ALS nurses, and she said, you know, the last things to go are hearing and smell. So he can hear you for a while, we just thought he was comatose. You know, he was just there. So once we found out the dude could hear us, we just started, you know, hamming it up, laughing, just being silly, really just pretending like he was half asleep.
You know, we made a lot of phone calls that day, and a lot of people came by and came in and kissed him and said really sweet things to him. And it was really, you know, people were bringing food, people brought booze, which was also very nice. It was really very, it was exactly right, you know, it was exactly the right way for him to go.
The most I could have ever asked for at that point was that nobody was sitting there anymore and crying about this guy in a bed who's just, the life is literally just wasting out of him. But instead of what an amazing human being he was. And you would have never thought that he was dying at all because of the conversations we were having. I don't know any other group of people that can accomplish that while you're watching your best friend die.
Tuesday was a very difficult day. The doctor came, and we called him because, you know, we told him what Tim's condition was, and, you know, basically, what do we do? And he said, I'll be there in 45 minutes. Anybody who needs to be there, get them there now. So we did. Dr. Wright comes over, and, you know, there must have been 10 of us, 15 of us in the room. It's all a blur at this point. But, you know, he kind of checks in with everybody, and he's like, is everybody okay with what's about to happen? You know, is there anything, you know, anybody needs to say, or, you know, you guys are doing the right thing. You've taken really good care of him. So, I sat there and I was holding his hand, and I had my hand on his chest because his hands were so swollen, you just couldn't feel his heartbeat there anymore. So, I was holding his hand, and I had my hand on his chest because I wanted to feel his heartbeat. And so they turned off the pulse ox machine so that it wouldn't start beeping and kind of going nuts. And it was almost, you know, like a bad comedy sketch. They couldn't find the off switch on the ventilator. So they disconnected him from it, and they ended up having to take it outside. And that was the first time that I'd ever been in that room with him, you know, without that sound. And it was the first time that I'd ever not heard the room became so cavernous, and it was this awful silence.
It was sad, it was bittersweet, but it was almost like, you know what, my friend's getting ready to not be trapped in this body that has basically become a log, and he can't move, you know. And I guess that's the pro of the con of him being that close to death, was like, hey man, your suffering is like really close to being over.
So many people just hide and don't show their faces, and they don't live lives that make noise. And Tim always lived a life that made noise. And his death did too, you know? And I miss him every day. I miss my friend a lot. But as much as I miss him, I am so grateful that he's not in pain anymore, that I wouldn't trade it. And I wouldn't trade what I went through for the world.
It meant everything. It meant everything. He was my best friend, and I got to marry him. And I got to meet incredible, incredible people. But most importantly, I got to really feel what love and hope feels like. He taught me that you can actually be the person you wanted to be your whole life. That you can do incredible things under insurmountable odds. And that you can do it with a smile on your face and love in your heart. He is the best friend I will ever have. And I think about him every second of every day. And it's still pretty awesome.
About 4 months after my diagnosis, I went to go see a grief counselor at the hospice center. And she asked me, what were my thoughts, what were my religious beliefs, what I thought about the afterlife and all that. And, I'm kind of Quaker-ish, but I'm agnostic. I don't know what's out there. My thought on the afterlife is, I'll see when I get there. What I don't believe in is damnation, because it just doesn't make any sense at all. Especially from a Christian point of view, I find damnation to be a really silly concept, because really, like, Pat Robertson's gonna get to heaven, that fucking douchebag's gonna get to heaven. And, I lived a good life and treated people well, but because I couldn't put blind faith into something that's cause for eternal punishment, it makes no sense.
Well, I'll die trying, I'll never give up. Even when the odds are down, when no one gives a fuck. And even when pigs are flying, hell is frozen up. Well, I'll die trying, I'll never give up. And I know it's hard to love someone whose head is in the stars, but don't give up, hold on soon, until I've kept my promise and have given you the moon. I will die trying, I'll never give up, even when the odds are down, when no one gives a fuck. Not even when pigs are flying, hell is frozen up.